So this is our first lecture. We'll go over a little bit of the textbook here. Our videos are going to parallel the textbook. We have chapters 1 and 2 that are core to where we're going to be starting. Chapters 2 will go all the way as far as through human nature. You don't have to read the area with the mind-body problem, even though the videos are going to cover that in order. Actually, the mind-body problem is really out of place. He's trying to attach it with human nature and mind-body dualism and materialism. And it's just a little bit, once we hit philosophy of mind later on, you'll see how that fits in actually more with epistemology rather than the basics of human nature. So in chapter 1, just to start with the textbook, you have many sections here. This philosophy of the movies, which you get at the end of the chapters, you can even consider for ideas for your paper. You would want to answer the entire question and make sure it's a video that you have an interest in. But go through the book and you can look at those philosophy of the movies and check those sections out, and you would get approval for me for that for your paper if that's the direction you want to go in for your paper. But each philosophy of the movies section takes on what the chapter has covered. In chapter 1, you get the divisions of philosophy, the main core problems of philosophy, which are metaphysics, the study of reality, epistemology, which is the study of knowledge, ethics, the study of values, of how we ought to behave, and then it's going to, and of course religion is also one of the central areas of philosophy. You have Socrates being brought in immediately into chapter 1, and Socrates, who sets the pace as the quintessential philosopher. You get the Euthyphro, which is the main question is, what is holiness, is the question of the dialogue. But it reveals the dialectic method that Plato uses and Socrates uses to get at the bottom of things. So philosophy is what's being demonstrated here is a process of logic, of critical thinking. You have much critical thinking brought into this textbook, and also reason, the use of reason and questioning everything. Of course, questioning being the pursuit of wisdom that we're going after, and trying to get to the bottom of our questions as much as possible. You also have part of the Republic being brought in, again, purely as a demonstration of questioning things and getting to the bottom of answers where there may be contradictions. Two ways that arguments can go bad is either through contradiction, that when somebody says is not actually so. There's a contradiction, either they contradicted themselves or somebody else can find the contradiction, as Socrates did. Or what's called the infinite regress. And the infinite regress is the chicken and egg type of thinking that you can keep going back and back and back and back, and you never have a real firm claim to begin with. And if you have no claim, then you have no evidence. So either two ways, and of course Socrates and the Greeks made use of both of those as much as possible to try to thwart their opponents and show that their opponents had no argument to begin with. We get much of this in the Apology, which is also mentioned in chapter 1. You get the Crito, C-R-I-T-O. These are all dialogues written by Plato to show the use of the question and answer routine that Socrates uses, the dialectic, and the important thinking critically in the first chapter and throughout the book. And all of the types of arguments that are used on page 33, you'll see the first argument, second argument, third argument regarding the laws of justice in the Credo. The value of philosophy, of course, and I agree, is not only just the pursuit of wisdom, but achieving freedom. And this is so. We're using philosophy and the basis of reason to get equality. The Greeks did not think that women were partial to reason. Of course, in modern times, we believe that reason is not gender-based. And so, you're developing freedom from previous ideas that were formulated maybe on cultural values, cultivating awareness. The more aware we are of each other or mistakes in our reasoning, the more we can free ourselves from problems that we thought were every day, that turned out it was a problem of logic. So, you have all types of pursuits of freedom, equality, wisdom that are inherent in philosophy. Page 35, 35, I'm sorry, 38, the wonderful question, does philosophy have a male bias? All right, well, yes, 99% of your philosophers until we hit modern times are going to be male, white male. I did have a student who asked a very good question, why don't we start in Africa, since Africa is the cradle of civilization with philosophy? And that's a good question. And the only problem is that African philosophy did not develop itself until the 20th century late. And that's because everybody wanted Africa. It had ivory and gold, and diamonds, and you name it, it had it. And so the original African culture was buried beneath the Anglo-Saxon cultures, very much so, almost to the point it was almost erased. And not until anthropology got in did we discover African cultures and tribal alliances. And they too also have philosophy. Their issues are in various positions that are different from the Western tradition. They have ethics, they have religion, they have theories of knowledge, but they're sorted differently because of the way the culture is structured. So it was a very good question. Okay, why don't we start there? That's science will start there readily. It's the cradle of civilization. It's not the cradle of philosophy. It's not where everything started with the Western tradition. So good question, but it just didn't happen to work out that we could even place Africa prior to Socrates, because we just didn't have any African philosophy or them writing it down as such. So male bias, yes, again for cultural reasons, but that has changed. Okay, we even had John Stuart Mill in the 1700s encouraging equality in philosophy. Now Socrates' teacher, one of his teachers was a female, so they did accept some if they could prove themselves, but otherwise, as tradition goes, it's normally male until we get to the 20th century and counting. So in chapter 1, you get a nice breakdown of the chapter summary. What is philosophy? The traditional divisions of philosophy, metaphysics, epistemology, religion, and ethics. Okay, and then you get an example of a very good philosopher, one we hail from today, Socrates. Okay, very famous, gave up his life for his beliefs. And then you're going to start into the historical position of the pre-Socratics, which I'm going to discuss. You do have the Eastern tradition. The difference between Eastern tradition and Western is that Eastern is based on ethics, Western tradition is based on reason. So that's the main division between the two. In chapter 2 then, you also, which your videos are going to be paralleling the chapters, you have the central question of what is human nature. Well, this is a good question because if we don't know who we are, then we may not know how we think. And so human nature, some may think is irrational. We have a lot of good theories on these, again, coming from the Greeks. We have one group of people called the Cyrenaics who believe that you can't know anything. The world is changeable, it's all appearance, and since we can't know the world, okay, this is the world here that I'm knocking on, then you can't really found anything, it's all basically opinion. Good argument, all right. Some people are going to say, well, there are apparently real things, I must be knocking on something here. And so some are going to say, no, it's not all appearance, there must be some things we can have agreement on that we really do know. And so there's your argument right there. Human nature, irrational? No, it's just some people are taking some things to be absolutely real, okay? And some people say, well, you may knock it this way and I may knock it this way, right? So we get variations, not irrational, different perspectives that we're trying to find a basic ground to rely on here. The Judeo-Christian version of human nature, of course, is that we technically are going to follow the likes of God. Everything is going to be coming in agreement with God's dictates, God's will. It doesn't make us irrational. We just have to know God's will, which we get through the Bible. And Islam gets it through the Quran, becomes our guidebook. And so we do get a change. We are still rational, but we're following the dictates of the Supreme Being, which is mysterious. Not everything is known, even though we're in this world. We don't know everything about it. Still some mysteries there. And that's because it was created by an otherworldly being that we do not know in particular. And so we have some mysteries and not so sure scientific answers. And so our human nature is left at sort of a dangling point in terms of judgment, in terms of finality, because we don't get that final answer. Number one, we don't know it. as hard as we try to. And number two is because it's left in the hands of the other world. So that's something that we have to accept. Charles Darwin, of course, believes that we're a rational being. Hooray for him. Now we're all rational again, okay? And we get that way through natural selection. We learn to put ideas together and behaviors together, and learn to accept that we can know things, okay, that we learn to even hear ethics out of need to help one another. You have different Darwin philosophers in here. That's for different reasons. Everybody who works on the theory of evolution agrees that evolution occurs. The difference is how it occurs, and that's why you have differences in people who argue this. Aristotle believed that we did evolve, but not by borrowing characteristics. He believed that people came from people and dogs came from dogs, and that's what he saw. He didn't see dog people or cat dogs. So everything came in a specific species. And Darwin, of course, changed that picture, overturned Aristotle, and said that everything is gradual and by borrowing characteristics. All right, so we had Darwin, and now you do have the thinking critically about Darwin. That's fine. It breaks down the arguments that are used, okay, for explanations and arguments in each premise. You can read those if you'd like to dig through philosophy. Otherwise, the explanation in the videos are pretty well covering that material. Our last section is the existentialist position, and they're almost the most recent. We end up with postmodernism as our very last theory that's involved in philosophy. Basically, the existentialists, that's Sartre, you have in your book, Being and Nothingness is the book that's referenced. Focuses, which is where we are today, on individualism, hyper-individualism. They didn't mean it the way we have it today as the selfie. that was a little overkill on existentialism, but that we are rational beings, that we are beings in creation, we aren't predetermined by our roots, and that we are left to our own devices to define ourselves. And a lot of this now, you notice that Sartre is writing during the 1940s, 1930s. This is when Hitler was around, and much turmoil going on and people withdrawing into themselves. But existentialism started before then. It started with Nietzsche in the 1800s, and Sartre is the one who actually, Nietzsche just kind of gets going on existentialism, and Sartre is going to lay down all the foundational principles. We are rational. We don't want to follow the herd. We want to be individuals and not be like everybody else. If we have time, we can watch Waiting for Godot, a little bit of that video that I have, because that was a criticism of existentialism and Sartre, and saying that we do need people, and without people we really can't go anywhere. We need each other as a social being. But the existentialists go completely the other way, in that we are individuals in creation. You have the feminist challenge. That's in addition to existentialism. Feminism sort of kicked off in the 1800s and became part of the modern tradition. And of course, Simone de Beauvoir is, that's Simone de Beauvoir, 3 words there. She adds into existentialism the feminist point of view, again, a focus on reason, and that women are going to think individually different than men do. So that's the feminist position brought in, and sort of separating women from men in terms of the idea of reason, which I think is not actually necessary, because philosophy is not focused on gender, it's focused on issues. So this question of feminism, to me, is not a proper place in philosophy, but it gets brought in, at least so that we, some people feel that we're following certain patterns of male thought that have led to certain ends regarding the answers, and thinking that women are going to look at things differently. Well, yes, maybe just a little, but the issues are not gender-based. Okay. So again, what we're going to stop then is page 81, and this is where we leave off with feminism and the idea of reason. It bottoms out that yes, human nature is rational, and this, whether it's feminist or male bias or whichever, that we are rational beings, and that we pursue philosophy rationally. And so we'll stop there. We won't get into the mind-body dualism. We'll save that for later, and you don't need to, you can watch the video, that's fine. But as far as that part of the book, we're going to save it for later. And then you can look in 2.7, historical showcase, and Plato, Aristotle, some of Confucius. We should be able to get into Confucius a little bit and be able to cover some of that. And then we'll move into, now you have reality and materialism and non-materialism in chapter 3. That's going to sort of piggyback a little bit onto chapter 1 with our pre-Socratics. You'll see some of our materialism, deductive reasoning brought in. It's going to jump into some of the modern theorists. You have Hobbes on page 150. This is in the condensed version of the book. Again, we can say that later. You can watch the videos in order. We'll catch up with them once we're done with the first exam. But we'll just go as far as Aristotle in chapter 2. And you can look at, again, at 2.7 in that chapter. And then that'll catch us up for our next lecture. All right. Thank you very much.